Yep. This one, Hobbs, or the other one?
Can you make Kena co-host actually, because she's going to be managing the Zoom more while I'm doing.
Yeah, you got it.
Thank you.
Do you want us to highlight your other camera that you're going to be looking at? Yes. Oh, you are. Oh, Keena's going to worry about that. Perfect.
Whatever you need, I can pop and drop it.
Well, when we're demoing though, we want Hobbs spotlight because the camera is better. So.
Yeah, I can swap it just like we did for the classes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Taylor. That's perfect.
Thank you. Yeah, this is for the viewing. We're just setting up my phone rather than my computer because my phone gets a broader view, which is a little better for Acro. Okay, so you can look at whichever one gives you a better image. But we're going to be talking about queuing to begin with, and then we'll get into some standing acros. So if you want to just kind of like, if you have specific things that you do for standing acro in your personal practice, and you want to start doing them as warm-ups, you can totally start getting into that stuff as we're talking about queuing and you're just listening to some of those ideas. This is going to be a little bit interactive with the queuing, and I'm kind of looking down here at my slide. I'm curious, sorry, this is new for me, the screen sharing thing. How do we screen share the slides? Is that?
You should have been doing it on your computer.
Just click on screen share at the bottom of the screen, and then it will ask you what you want to share. So.
Okay, sorry. I'm going to log off on my phone, then I'm getting on my computer.
You're great.
No, we can also share slides. Lizzie can share slides for you if you want.
Okay, so my account.
Keena, you are the co-host.
You can talk through my computer.
I'll get it set up in a second. But in terms of queuing, there's just some super important considerations that you want to have as a teacher when you're getting into queuing, so that your students have a clear understanding of what it is that you're trying to get across. One of the most important ones, of course, is going to be having a calm voice.
Lizzie's got it up for you.
Okay,
thank you, Lizzie. That's perfect.
Thank you. Sorry. So if you have a calm voice and you seem calm as a teacher, it makes your students calm. So, you know, it just kind of like creates an atmosphere where everyone feels pretty comfortable in learning and feels like they can actually take their teacher's cues with confidence. If you seem, for example, scattered or confused or unsure of yourself as opposed to calm, it can go across pretty badly. Direct cues. So it's really important, especially as you start getting into more complex and difficult acro, but also even if you're teaching beginners, that your cues are simple and direct. So you can say something like straighten your legs, rather than, for example, ask a question about, oh, why are you bending your knee in this moment? This brings about a conversation, whereas saying something like straighten your leg is very, very simple. So paying attention to the kind of language that you're using, like we were talking about directional cues, you know, in terms of like down towards the floor, this way and that way. And very quickly you learn with the people that you're talking to, or if it's beginners or not, which cues work better than others. So, you know, really pay attention to if you're using a cue consistently, like for example, legs up towards the ceiling. And you keep saying this in your classes and people are responding in a variety of different ways to that type of cue. Maybe there's a different way to reword that idea. Maybe, you know, you can say something like stretch your legs higher or point your legs away from the floor. I don't know. Like, I think legs towards the ceiling is a very reasonable cue. So maybe it's not like a good example for what to change, but there's definitely times when I've thought I was being very clear and articulate with my students with my direct cues, but I keep seeing this cue's not working. So that's a really good time to reassess and maybe try something different. Physical direction, something like talking about the ceiling is great. Remember that when people are in unusual positions, upside down, but also sideways, can be very unusual for people. For example, a position like side star, where you're being balanced on your hip, is pretty unusual. So giving people cues that are directional when they're in a different orientation than normal is very confusing.
Come close to the screen.
I can come closer to the screen. Okay. So just in terms of things that we generally want to use very, very consistently, if you're saying to someone, come more to the front, that should essentially mean their belly side. Come more to the back, that should always mean their back side. So those kind of directional cues should really never change. Doesn't really matter what your orientation is, if you're sideways or upside down or whatever. Of course, it can change if you're
talking to the base or the flyer. So if you say to the flyer, come more towards your front, that should always mean towards the belly side, come more towards your back, towards the back side. So standardizing your cues when it comes to direction is really important. Sort of ideally, we all get on the same page throughout this training with that kind of stuff. But at the same time, if you find that, you know, in your classes or maybe in your language, you want to use something a little bit different, just make sure that it's pretty standard and that the wording becomes really clear to your students. Solution-oriented cueing. This one's super important. So solution-oriented cueing is basically telling someone what to do rather than what not to do. What solves the problem versus, you know, a question about why the problem exists. This allows someone to just take your cue and implement it, and, you know, it doesn't bring into question whose fault it is or why it's happening or any of that. That type of thing is really, really useful, especially when people are already in the middle of doing acro. And, you know, the conversational type stuff where you're asking questions and investigating is a lot more useful in between sets. You know, if you really want to have a conversation with someone, if you have the time to do that, it's really great, especially if you're doing more one-on-one coaching rather than class teaching. A conversation can be extremely useful because in the coaching process, people are generally quite curious to figure out the how and the why of what's working and what's not. When you're teaching a large class, you won't really have time to do that with everyone. So just giving very direct, simple, solution-oriented cues can just accomplish, you know, what you want very simply. Sort of like Josh said, for example, the spotter, hands more under the flyer. Very simple. It doesn't need to say why. Say what to do rather than what not to do. It kind of goes into the solution-oriented thing as well. People just function really well with that kind of like positive reinforcement. Giving someone the solution oftentimes avoids them even having to talk about or ask what the problem is. Just going further down this list, disempowering examples of what not to do. Flyer's first time in hybrid and the base says, sorry, I don't see this well, don't be scared, I won't drop you. Why is that a disempowering statement, and what could the base have said instead that could have been more empowering? And to answer this one, I'd actually like to hear from some of you. So especially if you're flyers and maybe you've experienced someone saying something like that to you, like, how can this be disempowering? Why did it not work? What could have worked better?
Maybe you can answer in the chat and some of you can talk vocally about it.
Can we take the screen share off? So
yeah, if you turn the screen share off, then we can see people's, great. Now when people speak, it'll just go right to their camera.
Yeah. Promising something that can't necessarily be promised. Yeah, that's a good one. You won't necessarily know. You're just kind of hoping it'll work that way. Anyone else?
Can we talk?
Yeah, you can talk.
I think that because our subconscious takes everything literally, I've heard, not a psychologist, but so when you say, don't worry, you really say, worry.
Right.
Yeah, someone said in that chat that it implies that you're already scared when you may not actually be scared.
Mm-hmm.
So you're instilling that the skill is dangerous in some way when maybe the flyer was confident in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Has anyone experienced this personally and has actually like felt like, oh man, that just made me feel more uncomfortable?
I think.
Ash? Yeah, go ahead.
I feel like it instills kind of a little bit of a power dynamic that like the base has you, and it's like you're safe because of what they're doing, not because you're taking part in an action and you've agreed upon this thing. Like it makes you feel like, okay, if the base is telling me I'm safe, then I'm safe, rather than like your own ownership of your safety in that moment.
Yeah. So this is really good. There's a bunch of comments in chat that are also really great. So what are some things that could be said instead that could essentially get the same intent across? So intent versus like, what was it? Impact. Get the same intent across, but have a more positive impact. That's an open question. You can chat or respond verbally. Okay, Rosa says, we got this. So it kind of unites us into a force that we can do this together. Okay, I'm just reading the comments. Stack feels solid, being told to breathe. Yep. Taylor, you got something? Or is that just moving? No, okay.
Oh, just keep moving around.
Visualizing the move first.
Yeah.
So it kind of sounds like you both check in with each other, even if the base is leading the conversation. You're both like, okay, let's get on the same page. So taking a breath or visualizing what's going to happen so that both of you know. And then maybe at that point you can say, hey, it's scary. Or you can think about what to do if things were going to fail. Or
so the particular statement is the flyer's first time in high bird, and the base says, don't be scared, I'm not going to drop you. So for example, if I were doing this, I could encourage someone by telling them that they're really strong and really skilled at making the shape that they need to be in. And as long as they give me a strong jump, it's going to be quite easy for me to support them because they already know what to do. So I'm taking the idea that they already have the embodiment of this skill in another position where they know how to do bird really well and can hold it really tight. And as long as they give me a strong jump, I'll lift them to it. I can also add, if you don't quite make it in the jump, it's quite simple for me to come up a little bit and then just put you back down. So there's no rush. If we don't quite make it, we'll add a little bit of power step by step until we get to the position and it feels nice and stable for us. So kind of like using encouraging language of what we could do, and also like where things, you know, can go wrong and how to avoid them. So like saying that you don't have to give your maximum effort right away. We can increase the jump little by little until we get there and feel really solid. This is talking about not even practicing with a spotter. If we're including a spotter in the situation, you can also describe the ways in which the spotter can support the flyer towards where falling might be more dangerous. You know, so let's say if you're falling overhead, the spotter there can help catch your shoulders. If you're coming back this way, I'll lower you towards your feet and you catch yourself by just landing on your feet. So that kind of stuff, just kind of like describing the scenarios that can happen and the ways that they themselves can save themselves, that I can support them as a base, that the spotter can support them in their role, etc. I'm going to take a look at a couple of the chat comments there. Yeah, I like what, sorry, is it Andrea or Andrea?
Andrea.
Andrea?
Andrea, but that was Carrie who wrote that.
Sorry, I forget that.
Okay. Oh, right. If you feel comfortable, we can try this. I see that you have the strength to do this and I have confidence in you.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty empowering because, you know, you're talking about, like, let's say I as a base am saying this to a flyer. I'm telling the flyer that basically they're capable of this and it's reasonable to do it. So
Priya is mentioning maybe like progressions. So you do like an easier version of it first. And if that goes well, that's also another way to say, hey, I think we're ready for the next step.
Yeah. And progressions or using spotters, of course, like you start to get into that stuff if they need something else to become more comfortable. This is especially something that we as teachers should learn to assess. Like when we're noticing that we give someone a suggestion, we ask them to do a move, like, do you want to do this, whatever, however that works. If we're seeing hesitation in the person, as a teacher, that should be a cue to us that maybe this is a time that we can ask them, oh, do you want to do some other progression? Is there something easier? And oftentimes the person will be like, no, I'm, you know, just worried about that wall that's like 5 feet away. Maybe if we move 2 feet back, I'll be fine. I don't know. It could be something simple like that. So investigating if there's uncertainty is also really important. Okay. Jill is asking if we're talking about queuing within partnerships or queuing as teachers. Queuing as teachers in this case, Jill. Queuing within partnerships is related, but also a different conversation, which has more to do with relationship dynamics sometimes, but sometimes with teaching as well. Okay, let's see.
Is it possible to do the screen share again, Josh or Lizzie?
Okay.
Yes, I can do it.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just gonna wrap this up pretty quickly, and then I want to move into some standing acro stuff once Josh gets the screen share up.
Okay, next slide, or oops.
No, before, right where we were.
Previous.
Yep. So this is something just like the bottom 2 points. you know, it says it's okay if this reflects to you where you've done this in the past. What's more important is that we learn from the reflection and hold each other to a higher standard moving forward. So just goes along to show that we're all absolutely going to make mistakes, and that's okay. That's a part of the learning process. There's no better teaching tool than trying to teach something that you think you know to someone else and realizing how much you don't know. So learning from those little mistakes is a huge part of what being a teacher is all about, which is why, you know, as much as possible, you want to teach things that you understand really well, that are like maybe if not just one level, but multiple levels beyond your personal, your current personal practice of what you're exploring, especially when it comes to acro. That way, you know, it's still going to be safe, even if you don't know an element or two about it. But again, sometimes situations will surprise you. Cool. Okay, so maybe, let's see. Can we lose the screen share now?
Okay.
Thank you. Can we set up a quick little like breakout thing where people can maybe spend just a couple of minutes about discussing some of the most useful cues that have worked for them? So just to kind of keep this in the frame of what we were talking about, I'd like everyone to share just the positive. You know, like here's some words that work really, really well for me as a teacher in my experience, and it could be with your partner as well. But rather than getting into conversations about what doesn't work, just maybe a little rapid fire in your little groups, popcorn style, about the things that do work really well, and we can kind of share that with each other, learn from each other.
How many people per group?
Just about, say again?
How many people per group and how many minutes?
Let's do like 3 minutes. And what have we been doing? Groups of people, four screens, or four or five screens per group is fine.
Great. I'll set it up.
Let's do it. Wait, 1 second though. 1 second. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to, there's going to be a sheet that you can all edit in week 1. I'll release it right now that says useful cues. If you could just write in your useful cues on that sheet, then we kind of have a living document of all the useful cues that we've had. Is that okay?
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, okay. Let's do that.
It'll be shared right now. Okay. All right, it is assigned.
So people go into the Google Classroom and find it?
Yep.
Cool. Are they trying to do that right now, or this is after not?
Well, while you're in it, while you're writing down clues, I would just take notes on it so that we have a living document. Everyone's going to be working on one document, so just be mindful about deleting or going crazy. But it's good to have a list of all useful cues.
All right.
Sarah, can you show us using the screen share of where it is, just so everyone can find that sheet?
It's in Google Classroom. It's just released to you. It's underneath week 1 if you go to the classwork, and it's the thing called useful cue sheet.
Yep. Yeah, I see it.
Does everybody see it? Give me like, oh, I think it was just shared now though, even though I shared it a bit ago. Maybe because you're all around the world or something. But y'all got it?
Yeah. I mean, I got it. I don't know.
Okay. So Taylor's putting everyone in groups.
Thank you.
3 minutes on the clock?
Yeah.